Okay, traders, it's Thursday, March 5th, and market actually did some moving later in the day for once. Normally it kind of goes sideways after that first initial move, but I think as you'll see, some of these targets got hit late in the day, which is not typical, but it's nice when it happens. How you doing today, George?
Doing okay. Yeah, I was. I don't know. I wasn't terribly thrilled with today's price action, and we'll get into it here. But yeah, wasn't. It was fine overall. It was an okay, profitable day, but I just was not thrilled with how they were going about getting where they wanted to go. So either way, we'll get into it. So we'll start. Let's start off here with the NQ, folks. And I'm going to start here mostly because it did have some logic that was, you know, within range of how we deal with things and how we interpret the market and the movements and so forth. Because we post out everything as it pertains to like decision points and has to holds and whatnot. So it did actually adhere to it pretty well. Just again, it didn't do it in a very I would call it a clean fashion today. So in the pre-market, well, actually, I'll start off with the big giant blue box and why we do that. We're trying to explain to people just in very visual terms that the market in the overnight session had broken through this 850, so 24,850 area, which was the upward decision point to get to at least this first target up here at 201. So it's an understood, it's a known thing. We know that if they break here, that's really ultimately where they're trying to get to, at least initially. So drew a big box all the way to the second target so that people understood, like, here's basically where we're at. This is what we're dealing with. I think I commented today in the room, in fact, because of how price action was going, it was kind of moving, but kind of sideways for the entire session that we were there. I was just letting them know that, like, we're all dealing with the same market conditions. So if you're not doing a lot today, don't worry about it. So either way, we did have a pre-market scenario that played out pretty well, and they had a rubber band here. So this downward trend that started our morning off with in the pre-market got us close to our 920 start of the day here in the trade room. They had just barely peaked or pushed right through the rubber band. So not very committed. And we see this a lot. You can watch the video courses that we put out for free in how we trade this and counter trend trade, in fact. So rubber bands are always a counter trend trade, always. And of course, this was a really good counter trend trade. And again, we knew that the decision point was up here, right? Or sorry, the target and decision point were both up here around 201. So that was really not a lot to be said in the first part of the morning, all the way till 10 o'clock. So first half hour, there wasn't really much to talk about because we were already really in this move up. So the only two logical trades on the NQ were both counter trend trades today. So little, it's not that we manufactured it, it's just what is. So you have to know this information and know exactly where these levels exist so that you know what actions to take, if any. Some people, this is not in their trade plan. Some folks simply will not counter trend trade certain levels, and that's okay, whereas others do, which is why we provide all the information and really let people, make their own decisions on the trade side. But either way, both were counter trend trades to start the day off with. Counter trend off of the rubber band up to the decision, and the decision, which we label it with a green arrow on purpose to really signify, like, look, they have to. It's a must. They must break through here to at least get to the next thing, which is the hurdle. Obviously, they did not. So this is kind of why the charts are somewhat sparse today. There's not a lot of info. They pulled back, and then they placed an aggressive buy. Again, this is kind of the market talking through our indications here. And of course, it was right about the same spot as the rubber band. So it was an attempt at an aggressive to go back up. And we had mentioned also in the room just verbally that where they had previously bottomed out, that would also be more of like a nominal entry. And then if neither of these two functions worked, then your last resort was the lower has to hold. So it was, again, not clean, which is what I'm kind of getting at, sort of the theme of the day. They didn't really support the aggressive very well, and they also didn't get back down to the double bottom very well. So again, they kind of left us somewhere in the middle. It was a perfectly fine trade, but you had to take some heat on it. And then it back up, of course, over the POC. After that, it was kind of all she wrote because we did finally get targets to the downside. So we posted them, and the NQ only got to the first target. So really, if you look at it in the bigger picture of the NQ, it got to target 1 on the top side, so we called that. And it got to target 1 on the downside, and we called that. All ahead of time so that people aren't chasing and understanding, like, you see things like this, start seeing the market like fall. And inevitably people just get in like here. They finally just can't handle it anymore. And they just don't understand like how much is actually left in that run. So that's what we're trying to, engage our group with, is to say, like, you might be right, but you need to also understand how much further the market actually has to go. And so we just want to make sure it's super clear. So we'll transition over here to the ES. I'll blow this up a little more to get us in the morning here. So here we go again. Start of the morning. They also had a downside scenario that completely played out again well ahead of before we actually start the trade room. And then they had thrown in this level right here around 840 and a quarter. Same deal. Slightly through it, not a big deal. So it was a perfectly fine trade, but you again had to take about a 5 or 6 points of heat in this move. And then they didn't give us anything to the top side. So we were just shooting for core levels. So sadly, not clean. I think we had something. And that was later in the day. Yeah, they didn't give anything, did they? That's right. So they didn't give us really any major indications today of what they were waiting to like achieve to the top side. You can kind of see back here price action wise, they were obviously struggling to get through any of these higher points, but at the same time, they still didn't really retest that even pretty too well. So the last thing that we had put in there was a has to hold here. And as you will see, if you go through the training videos, we're looking for closures of candles. Obviously nothing here closed, but again, same situation. They had a has to hold, wicked really far through it, almost got to the decision point that we had put out here around 9:25 in the morning, and still pull back up to the decision point. So this really, of course, hindsight is always 2020. I just drug our decision point over. Again, you got the red arrow indicating like which direction we're trying to take the market. If it comes back to retest this zone, and you can see it pretty clearly that even here, at 4 o'clock, we're still running, I think. Yeah, we got a few minutes left on the trade here. It's still a resistance point for the market, but otherwise it got to 2 of our downside targets that we had posted pretty well. And again, it's important to know how much further the market can actually go in any direction. And that's really what the targets are for, is to help people understand, like, where are we at in the cycle? Am I getting in super late? Does it look like I'm getting in, closer to a decision point, or am I on the opposite end? And I was able to counter trend trade, well above us. But that's about it, folks. It was not a super clean day, but it did still remain pretty logical.
Can't argue with that. I don't really have anything to add. I did sit down to my desk at about 9:45, and over in NQ, I think there was a rubber band. I think you had said something about you didn't get in there, so it kind of took off without you. And by looking at the chart, it looked to me like because the targets were so close together that they weren't maybe significant enough. Any thoughts on? Did I hear that correctly first, I guess? And then if it did take off without you, what was the reasoning? Just curious.
Yeah, I didn't do a lot of times I'll just counter trend trade the rubber bands right off the bat. But this one, I didn't do it immediately. So I didn't place an order on this one immediately. I waited to see what was going to happen. And then when this one climbed back above. You can see here at the 935 candle, it sort of just retested. And I only took it for a very short run because I was not at all convinced as to what was going on. If you remember, we were talking about it in the room, you probably recall it. 56 was up here. Yeah, 56. 56 was like so 25,056. That was really the level that was going to be the hint to getting us any higher. They were going to have to break through that. So I only took it for a very short distance back to like the bottom of the 830 myself. And I was just done on the NQ. I didn't do anything else. ES, I did a much better job.
Yeah, so it's not
Actually,
that you didn't take that counter trend with rubber band. It was just a slightly different approach. Normally, I know you're really good about letting limit orders just sit, and I'm getting better, but I'm not as confident as you. So it's kind of cool. Normally you waited for it to prove itself out, and then you still got the trade. So that's pretty good.
Yep, and that's the nice part too, right? Like everybody can kind of come up with their own. Like it's within reason. You can't just do stuff because you feel like it. It's really based on the logic of the market itself. And we definitely try to help our group go through like that mental process of saying, like, don't just make up your own levels. But if you are the type of person who can step out in front of something and you're comfortable as that kind of trader, do it, because that's just who you are. Whereas some folks, I could name several names, they're like, no, man, I need to have at least some kind of confirmation. And then there may be other chatter in the background too, as far as what's going on and things to look out for. But yeah, it was this one. This was the ES. I took that one. Fast to hold. I took some heat on that one. It was almost got me knocked out. But I only took this one back to the decision point. So
well, there's definitely
profitable, but not a great day.
Yep, lots of movement today, and tomorrow's Friday, so I guess we'll see everybody tomorrow. And I don't think I remember seeing any big news tomorrow, but I'm probably wrong about that. Do you know off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, I know there's news at 8:30. I'm trying to rack my brain. I'd have to pull it up on my CME. I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure there is news at 8:30 in the morning.
Okay. So everybody be aware of that.
And we did the same thing today. I didn't chartcast anything until after news. I may do the same thing tomorrow.
Yeah, that kind of made sense because it was relatively important news. And like you said, sometimes you got to wait and see, let it shake out and see what the heck it did. Let the market tell us what's going to happen next. So, okay, George, appreciate your time, and we will see you.
I'd hate to give like bad news like that. The thing just like takes off. All right, guys.